Ah, well lads, you're after catching me in the middle of a spot of baking. See, I thought, I'm in the mood for a cake and I've got the extra time, so I thought, sure, look, I can go ahead and make one. I just need to add in the sugar now. It's from this new brand called Duelist. I don't know, names are getting strange nowadays. But either way, I do like a little bit of extra sweetness in my cakes, so sure, look, I'll throw in a bit of extra sugar, No harm in just throwing in a... It'll be grand. Marvel Rivals, the newest hero shooter on the market and the next Overwatch. And the rest of you can consider that a feckin' warning. Alright, now that the groundwork has been laid, we can start discussing. Marvel Rivals committed a crime which I'd like to call releasing while I hadn't finished Metaphor Refantasio, but it's okay, we all make mistakes. Some are just unforgivable. Despite its crimes though, I have to say Marvel Rivals is an incredibly fun game that does inspire some of the same wonder in me that Overwatch did back when I first played it, which is saying a lot considering I really like that game. So I have spoken about Marvel Rivals and Jeff before back when it was in the beta, and after playing in the playtest, I had a few issues that I personally wanted to see changed, and a lot of praises that I hoped would remain. So did they address them in the game's release date? Kinda? The Destructible environments are pretty much the exact same as before. I do love the dynamic change that they add to gameplay. Breaking down a wall to create a shortcut, destroying high ground that someone is standing on to ruin their sightlines, and suddenly having new cover appear mid-fight are aspects I absolutely adore, making every fight feel distinct from one another. Something which is also compounded by the lack of roll lock, which means mid-game you'll sometimes see different team comp ratios which can spice things up, though I'll return to this and expand on it a little bit later. Team-ups are still here with some new additions, and I have to say, they definitely improved on them, though part of this feeling may come from the fact that there's just more possibilities now with more heroes, which makes things a little bit less repetitive. The new Squirrel Girl and Spider-Man combo, and even the Iron Fist and Luna Snow are both really nice additions, but I have a few qualms with the mechanics of team-ups themselves. I will say that I wish they were more balanced in both their function and their actual application. Starting with the former, only one end of the team-up actually receives a benefit. Take Iron Fist and Luna Snow again. Irrespective of whether Luna Snow is in the game or not, Iron Fist always gets a 15% damage boost, something which happens across the board for any characters on the left side of the team-up. If they have the little yellow team-up icon, they've got their buff at all times, whether it's for healing, damage, or bonus health. So whenever there's a team up, the only person actually getting to experience it is whoever gets their new ability. And this actually leads to the next problem I personally have with them, which is that there's quite the disparity of strength between these. Some team-ups make a character so strong that most players will only play them when the team-up is active, because they view the character without the team-up as near worthless or just not as fun, whichever it may be. The easiest example by far is Magneto and Scarlet Witch. Now, in my opinion, Magneto without a Wanda on his team is still absolutely flying it, but with one, I killed like 5 people with this sword. It is insane how much damage you can output with it. And then the opposite is true as well. Groot, Jeff, and Rocket's team up is just Shinji inducing. Like, outside of the spawn room, I have seen it one singular time in a real game because it's just not that good. Neither Jeff nor Rocket want to be on the front line, and the damage reduction is not worth it at all, aside from potential fringe cases like stalling out during overtime. And again, Groot himself doesn't even get a real benefit from having them on his shoulder, other than the fact it's absolutely adorable. Imagine if both sides got a benefit, like Groot gaining increased cooldown reduction or infinite ammo while they ride on his shoulders. It would be way more fun for both sides, and it would even serve a better purpose. And this goes across the way. I'd personally find it a lot more interesting if all the characters received a new ability to benefit from their synergies. It could even be something really simple, like imagine if Cloak and Dagger also got invisibility within Moon Knight's zone, or got their own zone to place down to grant them invis. In fairness, that's a lot of new content that would need to be added, but I think it would make team-ups feel way more engaging. I still love the team-ups, but I just find that there's some missed potential within them, which is one of the worst yet best sentiments I can have for a game. Movement in this game feels smooth as only the best Irish butter, provided you're playing one of the designated speedy characters. Otherwise, it feels like trudging through some American margarine. Characters like Venom, Spider-Man, Jeff, Iron Fist, Mantis, Luna Snow, Black Panther, all these characters with movement-focused abilities in their kits feel so nice to control. It's lovely, but once you swap off these and go on to someone new, whether it's Adam Warlock, Penny Parker, or even characters with vertical focus mobility like Squirrel Girl, you just don't feel as good when you play them. Walking back from spawn and even during fights, it can sometimes feel like you can never move the exact way you want to. Is this absolutely dire? Not really, in fairness. Some may not mind this whatsoever, and I cannot fault them for that. It's quite simply that to me, coming from games that have very fast controlling characters, or even just very fast and tight controlling movement in general, it makes some of the options in Rivals seem a little bit sluggish. It's not a point against the game, but rather something that just personally bothered me a little bit and skewed me towards certain other characters in the cast. It's just something that I felt I needed to point out because I'll be returning to this later, though while still on the topic of controlling the game, please let me crouch in eddies, please, please, God, I'm begging you, let me crouch. I feel so restricted, just let me crouch, I beg you. Like this is what it feels like to play this game sometimes because of the lack of a crouch. I'd also like to point out that this game just doesn't run well. I have a pretty good PC. It's not insane, but it can run Baldur's Gate 3 on high graphics, which I consider a fairly high benchmark, and it struggles in Marvel Rivals sometimes on full low graphics. A genuine favorite and stupid strategy of mine is to go Doctor Strange and just place a portal in the middle of a team fight, because this will genuinely lag out some people's computers, causing all sorts of fuckery to go down. But now I'd actually like a moment to go over the character kit designs in this game, because I have a lot to say. These kits are some of the most creative and fun designs I have seen in a hero shooter. I mean, Loki, even though I'm not good at him whatsoever, is a character I have near nothing but respect for. You need perfect positioning knowledge if you want to get the absolute most out of himself and his clones, and that alone makes me adore him. Venom and Spider-Man's swinging mechanics do nothing but inject dopamine directly into my brain. Cloaking Dagger's character swapping scratches my love for stance switchers, even if they are a little underwhelming at times. Though alongside all my praise and love, there's a hefty amount of I'm not mad, just disappointed. First off, a lot of ults are just nuke buttons, which gets a little bit boring after a while. And secondly, some characters are just quite simply not balanced. Naturally, there's balancing problems across the cast. That is to be expected in this type of game, and it's even what they're aiming for. If everyone is overpowered, then no one is. So it's absolutely not a downside, just a forewarning that this game does have some criminal offenders in this case. Of course, there's Hela and Hawkeye who, like lads, they're just not fun to deal with. Hawkeye is the only character with a one-shot in his kit that doesn't come from an ultimate or an environmental kill protection, and it's just not fun. My distaste for one-shots has been made clear previously, and just for the Overwatch players in the room, I am a Hanzo player. I hate low-risk one-shots as a concept regardless. Even though Hawkeye needs to do a little more by having his crosshair on an enemy to charge up a shot, it's just not fair most of the time, at the very least in my opinion it isn't. And as for Hela, why does she have good long-range hitscan damage while also having a higher HP than most duelists and strategists, alongside two abilities that help her if any character gets close? Even though I love playing Jeff and I have loved him since the beta, I do think that realistically he should be a lot slower after eating people with his ult like he once was, instead of receiving the new speed boost from his shift. And Iron Fist? You know, the clip can speak for itself. So yeah, there's balancing problems, but this is a game at launch. What else would you expect? Maybe some role diversity? 18 duelists! So a fair common complaint in this game is that the amount of DPS is literally more than the amount of tanks and supports combined. And I'll just be calling them that because, come on, you all know the house that I was raised in. An incredible benefit that Marvel Rivals has was in the fourth word of that sentence. They have the Marvel IP, one of the most popular comic brands in the world. They don't need to come up with new characters. They have a pool of hundreds of heroes and villains to pick from, meaning that the only thing they need to actually do when creating a new character for the game is just to come up with their gameplay kit. I know it doesn't sound like, oh, they just need to do this, but that's a lot of work already cut out. But there's just a small problem. What are 60 to 70% of the Marvel characters if not a DPS? Now look, I'm not a Western comic book nerd. That much was already evident. So I really don't know the ins and outs of what does and doesn't fit a Marvel character or not in terms of a tank, DPS, or support. But that doesn't change the fact that 54% of the cast of your game being a DPS isn't exactly the best ratio that you want to have. In fairness, it is hard to turn some of these characters into supports and into tanks, but also they managed to turn Loki into a support, so it's definitely possible. You just kind of have to bullshit your way through a few things. If it wasn't obvious enough, I'm currently hinting at the fact that Rivals has a role diversity problem, but this is multifaceted and no way in hell that just add role queue can fix things, and I believe the first part of this is within the roles themselves. The DPS in this game just have the most going on. Their kits are the most engaging, they feel the most impactful, irrespective of whether they actually are the most impactful. We're talking about feel and emotion here currently. And this extends to the supports as well, at least a good chunk of them, both because all of them can fend for themselves and have good damaging capabilities. Supports and DPS in this game are constantly engaged, as they always see health bars going up and down, so they always feel like they're doing something. They're also the main characters with balancing issues, but that's absolutely not the point right now. It also doesn't help that both of these roles are more generic, or more accurately, their characters are more versatile in terms of the team comps and general methods of playing them. Tanks don't have this benefit. Some are very niche, working best in only specific scenarios. Like Penny just has a much easier time on defense since it lets her fully set up her nest properly on a corner, because once she loses nest, you no longer have a Penny. Or Thor only being at his best in situations where there's another tank for him to slap in melee range so that he can consistently gain stacks of Thor Force, because his only worthwhile ability is his F, and if you try to solo tank with him versus poke, you will feel miserable, because his right click it's not good. Though once he has a duo, in fairness, he does feel a lot better to play, but regardless, a lot of his abilities just aren't worth using. Then there's the issue that some tanks face of just feeling like they're dead weight with the express purpose of being a chunky hitbox for the enemy. A category I personally find Captain America and specifically Hulk fall into quite a lot. Especially Captain America in certain situations because his damage is so pitiful and his disruption is honestly nothing noteworthy. That is half the tank cast that, to the majority of players, feel like they lack impact, or rather that they would have a higher impact on a different role or character altogether, which makes the game skew on a mass amount of DPS and 1 or 2 supports, usually with the last person to pick resigning themselves to one of the other 4 tanks that actually feel like they affect the game. I would say that Strange, Groot, Venom, and Magneto have a higher feeling of just doing something, whether it's Groot placing walls across the battlefield for both offensive and defensive purposes, Strange engaging in all the possibilities that his portal offers him, Venom in his incredible disruptive potential, and Magneto with his range damage output, though he has his own problems with the team up as I mentioned earlier. Personally, I adore these 4 characters and even Penny after I managed to get a proper grasp on her, but to the majority of the player base, whether it's their expectations or experience on tank, they don't wish to play it, something which I believe can only be helped in one of 2 ways. One is granting some of the more lackluster tanks better capabilities. For example, tone up Captain America's damage and he feels a lot more threatening. Granted, he's fairly strong in a 1v1, so why not go down the route of making a shield bash better than just a movement option? It only does 30 damage. And in Hulk's case, I would say make his jump just feel smoother and add some impact damage on it, or just something. Make it a copy of like Winston ult from Overwatch. I don't care, I hate Hulk jump with a burning passion. Are these good ideas? Honestly, they're probably terrible. Like, these should not actually happen whatsoever, aside from buffing Cap's damage. Again, that poor man has 30 damage on both his slam and bash, it's pitiful. We're still in the early stages of this game, barely even 2 weeks to a month in. Buffs like these, when most are still learning, would be stupid, but regardless, a good chunk of tanks don't feel impactful, and more importantly, don't even feel that fun. In general, they're all pretty sluggish and lack mechanical depth. Take Venom. Despite how much I do love playing him, after just 2 or 3 matches of it, I'm already bored because it's the exact same gameplay loop of swing in, slam, shoot, shield yourself, and then get out. Either way, I am aware that a lot of future characters have been leaked already, but I haven't looked at those leaks, so I don't know what we're potentially getting. It's simply a case that we really need some more tanks and supports added in, because there's more than enough DPS running around, and if you want to make people flex out between the roles, the best way to do that is by making all of them fun to the vast majority, something that only 2 of the 3 have accomplished well. The tank role isn't engaging, fun, rewarding, whatever descriptor you like best, it doesn't have it. Yes, it can be fun. Like I've said myself, I love some Strange, Venom, Magneto, I do love these characters, even Penny as well, but I've already said all of this. But the thing is, I can get way more matches out of Iron Fist, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Squirrel Girl than I can of these tanks before I get bored and just want to try someone or something new. Tank in Rivals function more like bullet sponges than anything else, which isn't what they have to be considering the possibility for multiple tanks that this game has. After I played a few games of Wolverine, I honestly thought he would fit better as a drain tank rather than a DPS. Yeah, he needs some lower damage, higher HP and the like, but he seems like he would have an incredible tanking potential along with some solid mechanical depth thanks to his rage passive, which would give him different power states with a few tweaks. But instead, we've got Hulk, with one of the worst feeling movement abilities in any game that I have ever played. I know I made calls of changes to make on tanks earlier, and even before that I mentioned the balance problems, but I'm not looking for a balanced launch, and neither are the developers. We don't need balance during the launch period, we need fun. But the only role that provides the fun that keeps you coming back for more is DPS. Certain supports do as well, definitely. Mantis and Loki are absolute brain scratchers. No one wants to play tank and only tank every game unless one of the tanks really meshes with them, but that's the problem. The tanks do not resonate with the vast majority of players, or at least not enough that they want to come back for more tank the next day or even the next game. It also doesn't help that the comparisons can be drawn between tanks in ways that can't be drawn between the other characters. Strange and Magneto feel so similar that swapping between them doesn't feel like much actually changed, feeding further into the fact that tank gets repetitive very fast with its lack of skill expression and character identity in the long term. Like I already mentioned, the tanks lack mechanical depth. There's only one way to use their abilities, and they can't shift that around in the same way that the more complex DPS or supports can. All that's needed is just some higher skill ceilings, something that keeps players returning because they feel like they can improve and push their skills on the character even further than they could the day before. Without that, no one's going to come back for another game of tank. They're only going to come back for another game of Hawkeye, Hela, Squirrel Girl and the like. And that's most of my thoughts on Marvel Rivals. Sure, there's a couple other things, there's a few UI elements that I would like to see some tweaks to. Something like having a better sound for when overtime is actually about to end because C9ing happens way too often, and even some better visual indicators for when you're low on health, but those are like the nittiest of nitpicks. There is one additional thing though that is actually beyond just being a little bit minor, being that the third person perspective and crosshair don't match up perfectly, as in to aim optimally you need to aim a little bit to the right of someone, which gets both more obvious and silly as you get into closer range. But despite all these problems that I've found within the game, it doesn't change the fact that I really enjoy Marvel Rivals. If anything, it's because of this love that I've actually managed to find for the game that I've been able to come across all these individual elements that I'd like to see improved. Even though it took a few left turns, enough of those can still put you into the right place. Marvel Rivals is just really fun, despite all the problems that I perceive it to have. It's simply a good time. Terrible as a cake recipe though.